It's been 6 months since I left for Oregon. Not one call, not a single message from my parents, no questions about where I went, why my lease ended, or why their birthday card never reached me. Not that they remembered my birthday anyway. I still think about that last day in Arlington. It was hot for March, and sweat slid down my back as I taped the final boxes. Jasper hauled a crate of kitchen stuff, and Ray shut my suitcase with her knee. The apartment was nearly empty, just boxes and the old armchair I never sold. "You really not gonna tell them?" Ray asked, wiping sweat off her face. I was labeling a box, bedroom, donate. They haven't asked where I live in years, why start now? She didn't push, just looked over at Jasper, who muttered, "Still wild to me." But it wasn't wild to me, it was normal. I'd always been the background in their picture, quiet, useful when needed, invisible the rest of the time. Callum was the sun, I was the shadow. We shut the U-Haul with a loud clunk, and I stood there for a second, staring at the place I'd lived for nearly a decade, not because I'd miss it, but because of everything it didn't hold. "Ready?" Jasper asked, twirling the keys. I nodded, more than ready. The drive to Ashland was long and quiet. Outside, city streets gave way to trees and open sky. By the time we hit Oregon, something inside me had already started to soften. The apartment wasn't fancy, small kitchen, a balcony with a view of the pines, but it was mine, for the first time, mine. I hung my own pictures, set up my workspace the way I liked, cooked real food in peace. I woke up early, logged into work, watered the herbs by the window. Jasper and Ray visited often. Grandma Edith called every week without fail. No one else called. Some nights, I laughed about it, not bitter, just hollow. I disappeared, and no one even noticed. Until last week. When the phone rang and I saw the name, I just stared. Theodore Rhodes. It felt like a name from another life. I answered on the fourth ring. His voice came through, sharp and impatient. "You need to come home next weekend." No hello, no how are you, just an order. I didn't ask questions. I told him I had plans and hung up before he could start one of his speeches. Then I sat back in my chair, looking out at the trees, and felt it, that familiar weight, not sadness, just the old feeling of being used, not seen. That's how it had always been. When I was 8 and made honor roll, for the third time, I laid my report card on the table. My mom glanced at it and said, "Good job, honey," without looking up from her phone. That same week, Callum got a C+ and still picked where we went for dinner. The year I won the regional science fair, I came home carrying a trophy half my size. My teacher had told me to be proud. I was. My parents? Not so much. I set the trophy down at dinner. My dad just said, "Let's not make a big deal, Delaney, your brother has finals." That was the last time I brought anything home. By 17, I knew I'd be paying for college alone. I got a scholarship, worked 2 jobs, and stopped coming home for breaks. It was easier that way. I graduated early, lived with roommates, built up freelance work until I landed a solid cybersecurity job, remote, with benefits. I'd been there almost 3 years. I had savings. I cooked real meals. I was thinking about buying a small house. So when my dad called like no time had passed, like I was still a teenager waiting for instructions, I didn't flinch. "You need to come home next weekend." That was the first thing he said. I leaned back in my chair. "Why?" A pause. I could hear his frustration. "Your brother's engagement dinner. ISA's parents want to meet the whole family. They're traditional." Of course, not about me, just another picture to pose for. "I won't be there." Silence. "What do you mean, you won't be there?" "I mean I have plans. This is important for your brother, they're high profile, it'll reflect badly on us if you're missing." Us, not me, not a single question about how I'd been or where I was, just optics. "I moved to Oregon 6 months ago," I said. "I'm not flying across the country for a dinner I just found out about." Then, more silence, the kind that hums, like something about to break. "You moved to Oregon without telling us? You didn't know where I was before," I said. "Why would this be different?" His voice dropped, low and sharp. "How dare you move without telling your family? What's your address?" I almost laughed. "Do you even remember my last one?" He didn't answer. "That's not the point," he finally muttered. "It's exactly the point," I said. "You're not asking because you care, you're asking because now it's inconvenient not to know. Delaney, this isn't how families work." "No," I said, But it's how ours always has. Then I hung up, my hand didn't even shake. For a few seconds, I just sat there, letting the silence settle. Then the screen lit up, missed call, then another, then a text, one from him, one from my mother, one from Callum. I didn't respond. I turned off my phone, made some tea, and stepped out onto the balcony. The sky was fading into deep blue, the trees barely outlined in the last light of day. It was quiet, peaceful. By morning, the messages had shifted, from reminders to guilt, then from guilt to threats. 6 voicemails, 11 texts, 2 emails, subject lines like, "Can we talk? Family should stick together." Eventually, my mother called. Her voice was too composed, like someone trying to sound gentle while reading from a script. "Sweetheart, this isn't like you. You've always been so respectful. Your brother's counting on you. ISA's parents are very traditional. We need to show unity." Unity, a word that only seemed to matter when guests were watching. "I'm not going," I said. "Delaney, don't be difficult." "I'm not, I'm being honest." She exhaled, a sharp little breath of frustration. "It's just one dinner, smile, say a few words, then disappear again, if that's what you want." "You mean like I already have?" Silence, then she hung up. Callum called next. His voice wasn't angry, just unsure. "Look, I don't know what's going on between you and Mom and Dad, but can't you just show up, for me?" And for a second, I almost softened, almost. But I remembered every time he stood by and watched me disappear at the dinner table, at school events, in our own home, and never said a word. "No," I said, "not this time." The next day, my father called again. This time, the mask was off. "If you don't come to this wedding," he said, "you're out of the will." I let the silence stretch, just long enough for him to think maybe I was considering it. Then I said, calm and clear, "I make more money than all of you combined." I could hear his sharp inhale, like the words had struck him. "You're bluffing." "If you'd ever asked about my life," I said, "you'd know I'm not." He didn't reply, he just hung up. That was the last call I took. The messages kept coming, waves of urgency, guilt, frustration. I didn't read them. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the real estate listing I'd bookmarked a week earlier. It was still there, 3 bedrooms, cedar siding, room for a garden. The next morning, Grandma Edith called, just after sunrise, just as the trees turned gold. She never waited for permission, she called, and I always answered. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, voice warm and even. "How's the air up there?" "Cool and quiet," I said, "just how I like it." We chatted for a while. I told her about the lavender I planted, the deer I'd seen the other morning. Then she paused. "They asked me to call you," she said, not apologizing, just stating it plainly. "I figured," I said. "Let me guess, convince me to play the role one more time?" "They didn't say it like that, but yes, your mother's pacing, your father's sulking, they're nervous." "Because they miss me," I said flatly. She hesitated. "Because ISA's parents are asking questions." I let out a soft laugh. "Of course. I'm not going, Grandma." "I know," she said, "I wouldn't either. And that's why I always picked up for her, no pretending, no guilt, just the truth." She remembered my birthday every year, sent postcards from her weekend trips, asked about my job, and actually listened when I answered. She was the only one who saw me, not just what I could provide. "I just wanted you to hear it from someone honest," she said, "not because I think you owe them anything." "Thank you. You okay?" "I am," I said, and this time, I meant it. We talked until my tea went cold, about the house, about what color I might paint the front door, about fig trees and secondhand furniture and all the little things that made a life feel like mine. When we hung up, the sun was warming the windows. I reopened the mortgage calculator and started planning. The wedding came and went. I spent the morning hiking through Lithia Park. The trail was quiet, the trees tall, wildflowers scattered along the path. I didn't think about what was happening across the country. I didn't check my phone. I just breathed, listened, walked. When I got home that evening, there was one missed call, from Grandma Edith. I called her back before I even took off my boots. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, "you soaking up your mountaineer moment?" She sighed. "Well, the wedding happened." I waited. "It was tense," she said, "the kind of tension that looks like politeness but sits in your spine like a knot." Sounds familiar. She chuckled. Your parents did their best, but Mira kept fidgeting. Your dad barely said a word. Isa's mom kept glancing around like she was waiting for someone. Me. Yes, and when she realized you weren't coming, she asked why. I closed my eyes and let that land. What did they say? They tried different versions. First they said you were sick, then work had pulled you away, then it was a conference. All lies. Isa's mother didn't buy any of it. You could see it on her face. She started pressing, asked why you missed the engagement party too, and why no one mentioned you until a few weeks ago. Apparently, she had a private conversation with your mother after the rehearsal dinner. No one knows exactly what was said, but your mom came out of it pale and tight-lipped. I think she got read like a book. I almost smiled. And Callum? He looked distracted the whole time, kept glancing at the door, never smiled for long. Isa looked uneasy through most of the ceremony. I don't think she believed the perfect family image they were selling. I sat down at the kitchen table and let it sink in, not with bitterness, but with a quiet sense of something settling. The truth had caught up. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. They still think this is about missing a dinner party, I said. I know, Grandma said, but Isa's parents saw more than that. They saw what was missing. We talked for another 10 minutes, mostly about little things, weather, plants, an article she'd read. When we hung up, I opened my laptop and checked on the house listing again. It was still there. I bookmarked it. Again. A week after the wedding, she called while I was unpacking a box marked kitchen, fragile. Her name lit up on the screen like a familiar light in the dark. They're still talking about it, she said, no explanation needed. Isa's parents? They've started asking Callum directly now, why you weren't involved, why they only heard about you recently, why you vanished. What did he say? He tried to shrug it off at first, but Isa's mother doesn't like being lied to, and she doesn't let things go. I set the dishes down gently and leaned on the counter. Is the marriage already cracking? There's tension, she said, the kind that lingers, doesn't blow over with a honeymoon. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't want his life to fall apart. I just felt still, like watching ripples spread from a stone you'd finally stopped holding. They're asking around, she continued. Your parents want to know who has your new number, where you're living. They asked me again. You didn't tell them. Of course not. I said if you wanted to talk to them, you would. I let out a breath. Thank you. They're worried, not about you, about what Isa's parents might do, about how it reflects on them. They're not afraid of the damage, they're afraid of being seen through it. Yes, she said softly, but they're starting to understand that what they did to you, it left a mark. I looked around the kitchen, sunlight warming the counter, the smell of clean wood and citrus, a window above the sink that framed pine trees like a painting. This wasn't just a space. It was a life. They were the ones who disappeared, I said, they just didn't realize it until someone else noticed. She didn't reply, but the silence was full of pride. That night, I unpacked the last of the kitchen, lit a candle, let the stillness of the house wrap around me like something earned. A few days later, I found a plain envelope in the mailbox, no return address, but I knew the handwriting, my father's, blocky, exacting, as if control could replace closeness. I stood there for a long moment, the envelope in my hand. Then I walked to the fire pit in the backyard, struck a match, and watched it burn. The paper curled, darkened, then dissolved to ash. I didn't need to read it. The next morning, I signed the closing papers on the house, my name on every line, no one else's, no conditions, no strings. Just mine. Jasper and Ray texted me that same day. They were booking flights to visit, eager to help plant the first flowers. I'd already set aside a patch of earth for tomatoes and thyme. Later that night, I enrolled in a graduate course in digital forensics, not for work, just for me. I changed my number the next week. Only a few people got the new one, Grandma Edith, Jasper, Ray, my boss. That was enough. No more surprise calls, no more guilt-tripped obligations, no more being the shadow at the family table. The house was quiet. Not empty. Just real. 6 months later, my backyard was filled with voices and laughter and the scent of roasted corn and peaches. Jasper was at the grill, treating each burger like a delicate experiment. Ray danced barefoot across the grass with a sangria pitcher in hand and mismatched cups tucked under one arm. A neighbor's golden retriever dozed by my feet. At some point, my coworker's daughter, Marin, tugged my sleeve and handed me a string bracelet. "You're my aunt now," she said, "but the fun kind." "I'll take that," I said, slipping it on like it meant something. Later, as dusk wrapped around the yard, someone asked me, "Do you have family back east?" I didn't hesitate. "Not anymore." There was a quiet beat. Then I smiled, nodding toward the table where Jasper was laughing so hard he spilled lemonade on himself, and Ray was trying to teach a neighbor how to two-step on the grass. "But I have this." And I meant it. That night, after the last dish was washed and the chairs folded away, I stood at the edge of the garden. The bracelet still on my wrist. Fireflies blinked near the fence. The house glowed softly behind me. It wasn't perfect. It was better. It was mine.